האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Behar, and we're going to complete a piece that we did previously. This is Os Gimel, section 3, and we did the first half. Tonight, God willing, we're going to look at the second half. So just to recap the first half very briefly, the Zera Shimshon opens this piece, section Gimel, section 3, with a quote from a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu, in which very famous words actually, Shuvu vanim shovavim, return, O you wayward sons. And the Zera Shimshon asks a question, which is, if the word shovavim, which he is very struck by as an unusual word in the pasuk, if the word shovavim comes from a language of people who do tshuva, penitence, then what does the pasuk mean? Shuvu, return. These are people who already did tshuva. And the Zera Shimshon says it would be unusual for the pasuk to say return, do tshuva, and to exhort people who are already balei tshuva. They're shovavim. They did tshuva already. To tell them to do tshuva again, so to speak. So he says that's not what the word means. It actually comes from the language of being a captive, shevi, someone who's been captured. And he says that's what it's talking about, and it's referring metaphorically, if someone has sinned so frequently and so grievously that they are considered captives of the Yetzer Hara, and he brings sources to talk about this idea of being a person's neshama, a person's soul being considered a captive of the Yetzer Hara, then that's what the pasuk is saying, Shuvu vanim shovavim, you sons whose souls have been captured by the Yetzer Hara, you're considered like captives of the Yetzer Hara because you've done so much transgressing of Hashem's will. You need to do tshuva. And then he goes on to he develop the idea that it's never too late to do tshuva, even if a person's soul is considered almost as if it belongs to the Yetzer Hara. That's never true, because a person's neshama always belongs to Hashem. The Yetzer Hara, no matter what a person does, the Yetzer Hara can never actually own a neshama. And therefore, there's always time for the person to do tshuva, and for that tshuva to be accepted, and for that person to be redeemed, that person's neshama to be redeemed. So that's what he develops. That's basically, again, a thumbnail sketch of what the Zera Shimshon talks about in the first half of this piece. And now we're going to continue from where it says Ve'od Ksiv, where the Zera Shimshon will introduce another pasuk that supports this idea. Let us begin. Ve'od Ksiv, and it's also written in another pasuk. This is a pasuk, as you can see, in Iyov. Hen kol ele yifal el, ha'amayim shalosh im gover. Behold, God does all of these things 2 or 3 times with a man. So that's the pasuk. The Kasha, the Zera Shimshon says this pasuk is difficult to understand. Mahu yifal el. What specifically is being referred to when the pasuk says God does these things? Ve'od, and another question, lama dafka pa'amayim shalosh. Why does the pasuk talk about whatever it means that God does these things? Why will he only do them 2 or 3 times? So the Zera Shimshon now in the next paragraph will begin to explain what the pasuk is referring to, this pasuk in Iyov. Mishum de Amrinan beperik daled de Gittin, it's based on what Chazal say in the 4th chapter of Meseches Gittin. Hamocher atzmo ve'esbonov legoy, a person who sells himself and his children to a non-Jew. So here, imagine a person is so destitute and so impoverished that the only way he can feed his family is by selling himself and his family as slaves to a non-Jew. If a person does that, ein podinoso. The Gemara starts by saying we do not redeem such a person. Normally, we have the mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim. If a person is captured and taken as a prisoner, then we go to all lengths to redeem the person and save that person. But here the Gemara starts by saying if the person willfully sold himself into slavery with his family, then to Akum, to a non-Jew, then we don't redeem them. But the Gemara continues of the Gemara Amar Ravasi, and the Gemara Ravasi comments on that original teaching that we don't redeem the person and the person's family. Ravasi says, "V'hu shemochar v'shana v'shilesh." That rule of not redeeming the person only applies if he sold himself and his family once, and then he was redeemed. V'shana, and he did it a second time, and then he was redeemed. V'shilesh, and then he did it a third time. So if a person sold himself and his family to the goyim 3 times as slaves, after the third time, the Jewish community no longer has a responsibility to redeem that family, according to Ravasi's understanding. V'im kain, and if so, ad sholosh pe'omim. If so, then we can look back at the pasuk in Eov and say, and now the Zera Shimshon is going back to the theme that he already developed about a person sinning so much that he belongs to the Yetzer Hara, or seems to have become a captive to the Yetzer Hara. Im kain ad sholosh pe'omim. This tells us that until 3 times min hashamayim yisayuhu liftos atzmo, a person will receive heavenly assistance, siyata dishmaya. A person will receive heavenly and divine assistance up to 3 times of repeating their prolific sinning so many times that they become as if captured by the Yetzer Hara. So if the person does it 1 time and feels like he can't escape from the Yetzer Hara, he can't escape his life of transgressions, then min hashamayim, they'll rescue the person. Then a second time, then a third time. But after the third time of the person kind of demonstrates an addiction and keeps returning to a life of chait, a life of avonos, a life of sin and transgressions, then the person will not receive heavenly assistance, as the Zera Shimshon continues. Lo yisayuhu min hashamayim. After the third time of becoming a captive to the Yetzer Hara and not being able to escape on one's own, then the person will not receive assistance min hashamayim. Ad sheya'aseh kol ma'amatze kocho, until this individual, does every conceivable thing in his own power, lashuv b'shuva shlema, to return and repent with a full teshuvah. So the Zera Shimshon brought in the pasuk from Eov to say, here we're continuing this idea of the concept and the idea, the phenomenon, we might say, of a person sinning so frequently, so often, and so deeply that they become a captive of the Yetzer Hara. And the pasuk in Eov therefore teaches us that this can happen once and the person will receive divine assistance to escape. This can happen 2 times and the person will receive siyata dishmaya to escape. But if it happens a third time, then after the 3 times, then no longer will the person receive the assistance. But hope should not be given up, because the person can still, on his own, on his or her own initiative, the person can do everything that needs to be done independently to escape from the clutches of the Yetzer Hara, so to speak, and to return to a life of following Hashem's ways. Next paragraph. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, and here the Zera Shimshon is going to interpret homiletically psukim from Parshas Mishpatim that talk about the rules of what happens to a girl who is sold as an amma, a maidservant, to a Jewish, to be part of a Jewish family, and is sold as a maidservant. In order to understand what the Zera Shimshon is going to say and how he's going to interpret these psukim, again, not in the literal sense, let's take a look at the psukim first. I'm going to read the psukim for you. They probably will sound familiar. These are well-known psukim from the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, where it talks about the laws of avodim, of Jewish servants and maidservants. So here we go. V'chi yimkor ish es bito le'ama, and when a man will sell his daughter to be a maidservant, lo seitzei ketzeis ha'avodim, she will not go out from being a servant as the slaves do. She will not be limited by the same rules that apply to the slaves, to non-Jewish slaves. And even to Eved Ivri, even to a Jewish servant, she's going to have different rules, and there will be more ways for her to be redeemed from this state of being a servant. Next pasuk: Im ro'a be'einei adoneha. If she is evil, she's not good, not acceptable in the eyes of her new master. Asher lo ye'ada, who does not designate her. That means he himself does not designate her as a wife. He doesn't say, I'm going to marry this woman. Don't forget, in the time of the Torah, a man could have more than one wife. Polygamy was okay for a man. So therefore, if he says he's not going to return this maidservant, he's not going to marry her, vehefda, and he's not going to redeem her. That means he himself is not going to allow her to leave before her time of servitude is up. La'am nachri lo yimshol lemachra bevigdova, to a non-Jewish person, non-Jewish nation, literally, but it means to a non-Jewish person, he does not have the authority to sell her bevigdova, as he has already betrayed her. Meaning, since he is not doing the things one would normally expect him to do to benefit this Jewish girl who became an amma, a maidservant, he hasn't done those things. That he certainly can't say, "Oh, I'll just sell her now to a non-Jew." He's not allowed to do that. Ve'im livino yadena, and if to his son he designates her, meaning he, instead of marrying her himself, he arranges for his son to marry her. Ki mishpat habanos ya'aseh lo, then the son has an obligation to treat her like a regular wife. He can't say, oh, she was a maidservant, and therefore I can treat her in a different way than I would a regular, so to speak, girl that I married. No, she has to be treated like mishpat habanos, like a regular girl, a regular wife. Im acheres yikach lo, and if the son then, after marrying this maidservant girl, takes another wife, she'era ksusa ve'onasa lo yigra, he shall not diminish her food support, the support, financial support and food support that he gives her. Ksusa, her clothing, he cannot diminish. Ve'onasa, in his times of intimacy with her, he should not diminish. So he needs to treat her respectfully and appropriately, even if he takes another wife. Last pasuk, v'im shalosh eile lo ya'aseh lo, and if none of these three things are done for the girl, the yotza chinam, then she will go out for free at the end of her 6-year period of being a maidservant, ein kosef, and there will be no payment. She will not have to make any extra payment to be able to leave and to go back to her status of her family, go back to her family and her status of being a regular Jewish girl. So now the Zera Shimshon is going to refer to those psukim and go through them with, as I said, a kind of homiletical interpretation connected to this idea of being a servant of the Yetzer Hara, becoming a servant to the Yetzer Hara through sinning. So the Zera Shimshon says, "Umikol makom lo seitze ketseis ha'avadim." Nevertheless, this neshama will not go out from being a servant to the Yetzer Hara according to the usual ways, v'chule, etc. Zeh shemochar nishmaso. This refers to someone who sold his soul. Top of the next column. Kimo shekosav hazohar hakadosh, as it's written in the Zohar, lo seitze min ha'olam neshama hazo ketseis ha'avadim. This neshama that was held captive by the Yetzer Hara will not leave this world like other servants of the Yetzer Hara, shel el zar, of this foreign god, so to speak, meaning the Yetzer Hara is being referred to as here as a foreign god, a foreign power, bar minan. It should be far from us. That's the expression, a similar expression to chas v'shalom. Rak tzorech livdosa ulahotfia lecherus. It is necessary for the person to redeem his neshama and to take it to freedom take it out from captivity from the Yetzer Hara before the neshama leaves this world, meaning before the person dies, the person must do every conceivable thing to free his neshama from the Yetzer Hara. Omnam, however, im ro'a be'enei adoneha asher lo ye'ada vehefta. That's a quote from one of the psukim we read. If she is evil or bad in the eyes of her master who does not designate her for marriage and does not redeem her. So the Zera Shimshon is going to explain what that means. Klomar, this means to say, shenechsheves ro'a be'enov. This means if his neshama appears to him to be bad, shekfar chota harbe, because he sinned so much, v'nofal b'diyuta hachtachtona, and he fell to the lowest spiritual level, ad she'ein tekuma lemapalto, until he feels there is no way to rise up from such a precipitous fall, such a deep fall. He's fallen so low that the man thinks, I can't possibly get out of this. I'll be, God forbid, a captive to the Yetzer Hara forever, and I can't rescue my neshama, so to speak. V'choshev she'avad sivro v'sochalto, and he thinks that he has lost all hope and all aspiration. La'am nochri lo yimshol lemochro bevigdova. To a non-Jewish person, he's not authorized to sell his neshama once he already betrayed it. What does that mean? Lo yosif chet al pesha. At the very least, this person should not add any more sins to the transgressions he's already committed. Vizadon al resha, and he shouldn't add any more intentional transgressions to the wickedness he's already committed. Lehidavek be'umos, to cling to the umos, to the nations of the world, velasos kemaseim, and to come completely to totally copy their actions. Because he already betrayed his neshama by all of the sins that he already did. So the Zera Shimshon is saying, again, according to this homiletic interpretation, this drash on these psukim, and connecting all of them to the idea of the captive neshama. So if a man feels like there's nothing he can do to break free from the Yetzer Hara and to redeem his neshama from the Yetzer Hara in a state of captivity, at the very least, let him not add any more sins. Let him, as terrible as it is, continue doing the things he's already done, but not add any more. Let him stop from continuing to add sins to the, in addition to the ones he's already committed and the transgressions he's already violated. Next paragraph, Mishum, because She'im livno yadena, Kimishpat habanos ya'aseh. The pasuk says the man, going back to this man who owns the maidservant in Amma, he can designate her to his son, and then the son will treat her like all of the Jewish girls need to be treated when they become brides, when they get married. So the Zera Shimshon says, let's go back to our interpretation. She'im yaschil lashuv b'tshuva. If this man will simply stop sinning and begin the first baby steps to do tshuva, efsher she'iyah lo bein, perhaps he will be blessed with a son, osek batorah, who will involve himself with Torah study and lead a righteous life, uvira mizake abba, and the son will bring merit to the father, vigil yagil avi tzadik. And it will be along the lines of the pasuk in Mishlei that says the father of a tzaddik, the father of a righteous person, Gil Yagil, will surely rejoice. Shelotia od kimo ama, and then the man's neshama, once he brings a son into the world and his son starts following the ways of Hashem and studying Torah, then the man's neshama, his own neshama, will receive merit for that and will no longer be considered a servant to the Yetzer Hara, rak kimo bas, but it will be considered like a daughter, meaning like a regular neshama that's part of the Jewish people. He will be able to restore his neshama because of the actions of his son and his own actions, and beginning to do tshuva and beginning to break away from the Yetzer Hara enough that his son will be raised in the right way and will become a righteous person. Next paragraph. Imacheres yikach lo. So the pasuk said, if the son marries the maidservant and takes another wife in addition to her. So the Zera Shimshon says, let's continue our interpretation. V'im yoshuv b'tshuva shlema. This man who is trying so hard and doing everything he can to break away and redeem his neshama, let's imagine he's able to do tshuva shlema. He is able to break away and do a full and complete repentance. V'yikach lo neshama acheres kedosha utahora. Then he will be able to get a new neshama. It's as if he's a new person. A Baal Tshuva is like a new person. And his new neshama will be holy and pure. Yizoher l'sakein af harishona, but he still has to be careful to be concerned and to repair his original neshama. She'erach susa ve'onasa lo yigra. Those are the three things that the maidservant was entitled to, and that couldn't be diminished. So the Zera Shimshon explains that how do we understand those terms in our context? She'era, her food support, hainu mizon hanefesh. This means spiritual sustenance. Shehu Talmud Torah umasim tovim. So this man has to make sure to continue studying Torah and to strengthen his Torah study and his acts of good deeds, and this will give spiritual sustenance to his neshama. Kisusa, the clothing allowance, so to speak, that was given to the woman, hu haluvu shemislabesh bo ha'adam. This is the spiritual clothing that a person can wear bisod chaluka derabanan, according to the hidden mysteries of the Kabbalistic idea of chaluka derabanan, the cloak of the Rabbanan, the cloak of the rabbis, the outer garment of the rabbis. So there's this idea that a person can do things that will give him spiritual clothing, and that's what's being referred to here. The onasa and the set times of being with the wife, having set intimate times to be with the wife. What does that refer to in our context? Likboa atzmo bikvius, to set inviolable times and periods, bikvius gomor, with a complete commitment, b'derech hatova, to follow the good path, kedei l'saken es ha'me'uvas, in order to fully repair all of the decay and the corruption that this person brought into the world and brought to his own neshama. He's got to fully commit to never returning to that path again, and to only continuing on a path of tshuva and repairing the damage that's been done. V'lo yisha'er bo grius v'kilkul, and there shouldn't be left any diminishment or any damage to his neshama based on these commitments. V'lo yigra me'ela al kolponim, and he should not diminish from these things at all. So the person who allowed his neshama to become a captive of the Yetzer Hara to the point when he couldn't free it and no longer receive divine assistance to do so, such a person has a long road ahead of him, many things that he has to do and fight and struggle, but it's possible to do, to get back on the proper path. And then the person has to make sure that he never weakens at all and never diminishes his efforts at all. Continuing next page. V'im shalosh eila lo ya'aseh lo. And going back to the pasuk, and if he doesn't do these three things for the maidservant, so what does that refer to? Shelo hayulo bein talmud chacham. That means in our case, if the man did not bring a son who's a talmud chacham v'tzadik and a tzadik into the world, so if that didn't happen, v'gam lo zocha shetovalo neshama acheres kedosha l'sayo, and he also didn't merit by his own beginnings of tshuva, he didn't merit to receive a new soul that would assist him in his further efforts. And he also didn't make a total commitment to stay on a new good path completely. He hasn't been able to do any of those things. So if the person failed in all of the ways that the Zera Shimshon instructed him that he could follow, then vihigiu hasimonim shetzorach latzeis min ha'olam. Then the person needs to be concerned when the signs begin to come that the person's going to leave this world early. And that's connected to the idea of the Amma, the maidservant. When her physical signs of puberty come, she goes free. And so here we're saying, in our context, where the homiletic interpretation that the Zera Shimshon is offering, if signs begin to come to a person, perhaps signs of disease and illness or other things, physical breakdown, deterioration, that make a person think that they don't necessarily have a full many years ahead of them, if that happens, shehigia kitzo, or the person's regular time, maybe the person is an older person, an elderly person, and reaches the time that his lifespan on this earth is actually coming close to being finished. Oshnas hayovel, or the Yovel year is approaching. A maidservant could go free when she finished her time period of service, or the Yovel came. If a Yovel year came, then automatically she would go free. With the Eved Ivri, with the other Jewish servants, all were automatically freed in the Yovel year. Shehu Sofa Olam, and that's a reference to the end of the world as we know it, meaning if the time of Mashiach comes, ve'ein biyodo elatshuva bilvad, and all this person has is at that time when the person either dies or the Mashiach comes. At that point, all the person has to show for his efforts is the little bit of tshuva that he did, the first steps of tshuva. Im kol zeh, nonetheless, toil tshuvaso sheteitze chinom midin gehinom. Still, this person, that will be enough. The tshuva that he did will be enough to go free, to be freed from the punishment of Gehenna. But the person will not merit to receive, and this is a Kabbalistic idea, as you can see from the parentheses and also from the language of this phrase, the person will not receive the 400 worlds that are desirable, that are set aside for the tzaddikim. And this idea, apparently, this Kabbalistic idea is that after a tzaddik dies, after a tzaddik leaves this world, that righteous person will merit 400 desirable worlds as a reward for his righteous activities. But this person, who certainly can't be referred to as a tzaddik, this person was a captive of the Yetzer Hara, but has to his credit the efforts that he made and the steps that he took to begin to escape from that captivity to the Yetzer Hara. Such a person will not be punished with Gehenna. V'zehu, and that's what the final pasuk referring to the Amma Ivri, or the maidservant, says, and she will go free, ein kosef, there will be no payment. And so here those words are taken to mean the man will be free of Gehenna, but there will be no special reward of this. There's no special reward that the Kabbalah talks about of the 400 worlds. So in completing the piece, now that we've done the second half, just to put it all in perspective and to recap the whole piece for a moment, the entire Os Gimel, the entire section 3, in the entire section, the Zera Shimshon was working to develop this idea that is both frightening and also very inspiring. It's frightening that any human being could become a captive of the Yetzer Hara and could become so addicted, so to speak, to sinning and transgressions that they could find themselves in a situation where it seems hopeless. There's no escape. They've given up so much of their free will that they are as if they are hopeless captives of the Yetzer Hara, and that is certainly a terrifying prospect. However, the Zera Shimshon brought through many sources, continuing here in the second half, to show us that a person should never give up hope, because a person's neshama can always be freed from the Yetzer Hara. It can never be completely captured by the Yetzer Hara without any hope of escape. and the person will receive divine assistance. And even if the special divine assistance is misused and abused and comes to an end, the person on his own efforts can do various things to help himself receive merit and to escape from the Yetzer Hara. And even if the person only does the minimum and takes the most basic steps of tshuva, of repentance, even that person will be saved from Gehenna. And that's inspiring to note, for us to know that there's always hope for every person to escape from the Yetzer Hara if they totally commit to returning to a path of avodas Hashem, of serving Hashem. Yasher Koach for joining us in the Zera Shimshon this week, and we look forward to learning again together, God willing, next week in the Zera Shimshon.